Okay. I do believe that we will have more people joining us. It kind of gently straggles in sometimes on these things. So I want to welcome you all. I'm Marcia McInnes, President, NAMI Tri-Valley. NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness. And we will be having a presentation by Rebecca Bauer-Kahan, California Assembly member for the 16th District, on the subject of the Miles Hall Lifeline Act 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline. So the agenda has been revised a little bit, and so we'll have a 15-minute presentation by Rebecca, and then we will have a 30-minute Q&A. So we'll actually end at 8 o'clock instead of 8:30. And I think that fits better all the way around. But before we get started, I'd like to say a few words about NAMI Tri-Valley. And this may just give other people a chance to jump in on our presentation tonight. So NAMI Tri-Valley is a grassroots, all volunteer 501c3 nonprofit. And we provide support, resources, education, and advocacy around psychiatric disorders. So we primarily serve Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton areas and have done so for nearly 15 years. So some of the programs that we provide are support groups. In fact, we have 4 and possibly another one. So we do that. We know how to do support groups. And we have family caregiver groups. We have a group for parents of kids under the age of 18. We have another group for peers who have a diagnosis, and they meet twice a month. Some of the other things that we do are in some of our concerns are around suicide prevention. And so every year we do co-host a suicide prevention workshop for family caregivers. Next August will be our 8th year. And this is a very unique opportunity for families of someone that they may be concerned about around suicide. They can learn how to see the signs and symptoms early on rather than during a crisis, to see if there's any intervention that can be done at an earlier time. And who knows their loved one best but the family member. Some of the signature programs we have and we're very, very strong and very proud of is Family to Family, 8-week course. And this is also for family members to learn more all about mental illness. And we will be having a class starting, Joyce, when?
February 9th.
February 9th. And we have information on our website, and we have our coordinator, Joyce Lombardo, here tonight. And if anyone wants to know more about it, let us know, let me know, and I will connect you to the right person. We have a general meeting as well. And what that means is that we invite special guests in for discussion around their expertise in mental health. Sometimes we invite a psychiatrist, or it may be someone who knows about mental health policy, could be the director of Alameda County Behavioral Health. So we have a variety of people that come in, and we book up fast. For February, we do have our guest speaker, Ron Bernstein, of the Bay Area Community Services, and he will talk about the Valley Wellness Center, which is a drop-in program for anyone living with a mental health diagnosis. All of our programs are free. So, if you need any further information, you can check our website at NAMI-trivalley.org. At this point, how are we on time? Okay? Are we okay, or am I a little early?
Nope, you're fine.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, well, thanks for listening about NAMI Tri-Valley, and we'll focus now will be on our guest speaker, Rebecca Bauer-Kahan. But before we begin, I would like to give a few guidelines to tonight's talk. So please mute yourself. And then we ask that your questions be put in the chat if possible, and I will read them back out loud. And if you're on the phone, if we have people on the phone only, just if you would kindly wait until after our guest speaker has completed her talk, then that would be the time to just pipe in and ask. I would like to thank Julie Testa, Lois Lindahl, and Rebecca's staff for their invaluable help. And thank you to all who are here tonight. And let me now present to you Rebecca Bauer-Kahan.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be with all of you tonight and see some old friends, some new friends. And I want to thank you for that incredible work. My goodness, you guys are doing a lot to support a community that really needs the support. So I want to thank you for that. I have to say that I started this work, and I'll tell you a little bit about what landed me carrying this legislation. But it was really just a constituent who came and told me her story. And it was so clear to me how much we as a state had failed her. And so we started working together on what would become AB988. But in the journey of carrying this bill, what became very clear to me is that there are not enough mental health champions. It is just an area that needs so much more attention. And it is actually something that I have now identified for people who are looking at joining me in the legislature, that this is an area that needs more people. It needs more advocates. You know, I will continue that we're carrying this year 3 pieces of legislation, 2 in addition to AB988 focused on mental health. So we continue to work actively in this space, but we need more. There's so much to be done that I couldn't, if every one of my colleagues did this, we would not have enough champions. So, you know, I think your advocacy in the community, your support is so critical. But I do want to give a huge shout out to actually Senator Eggman, who in redistricting is picking up the Tri-Valley, who has been an incredible advocate for mental health. It really is one of her true passions in life, and she has been one of the incredible advocates for this. So hopefully you'll get to meet with her at some point in the future. So a little bit about the history of 988. So as I mentioned, you know, it came out of a conversation I had with Tawn Hall, Miles Hall's mother. For those of you that don't know what happened to Miles Hall, he was killed by law enforcement in the midst of a schizophrenic episode. His mother is an incredible woman who, like most parents dealing with a family member with mental illness, had been working every angle to get him the care and support he needed. But in a moment of crisis, his life was taken way too young. And when I talked to her, one of the things that struck me about our conversation, so many people were focused on the moment of his killing, which was very important. But what struck me actually, as she told her story, was the months and years before. And as she talked to me about accessing mental illness, she kept saying, and then I called the police. And then I called the mental health officer at the police department. And I was like, why were you calling? Like, I understood that was her access point in, but it seemed so wrong to me that here was someone needing healthcare and she had to call the police, right? I mean, this young man had never done anything to cause him to be engaged with law enforcement except have an illness. And that felt like a failure of the government, of the system, and we needed to fix it. And so we started to look at what we could do. And in that process, we discovered that the federal government had just recently passed the federal enabling legislation for 988, which I want to start by saying was passed unanimously in Washington, which I want people to know, because at this moment in time, the fact that anything would pass through Congress unanimously is remarkable, right? But here was a piece of legislation that enabled states to charge a fee that had passed unanimously and signed by President Trump, that enabled us to change the way mental health was handled in America. And that's really important, I think, for us to talk about, which is how wide the support is for this type of legislation. As I have worked incredibly hard in the legislature to move this legislation, there is almost nobody that I have a conversation with that doesn't have a story of a loved one, of a neighbor, of a friend who's been touched by mental health crisis, who says, God, this would have been a game changer for me, right? And I think that's what leads to the incredible support for these measures. And we saw that when it passed unanimously in Washington. So this was in October of 2020, they passed what was the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which would turn 988 into the suicide hotline into 988. So instead of having to remember the long 10-digit number, anybody in America would be able to dial 988 and get our incredibly trained suicide prevention hotlines, which is really, in and of itself, a game changer. We actually expect that just the change to 988 from the 10-digit number will increase the number of people calling the suicide prevention hotline by 30%. So that in itself was remarkable. But in addition, they enabled us as states to take it further than that, to say, we want to do more than just give you access into the suicide prevention hotline. We want to create an entire system that provides access into a comprehensive mental health care system. And so they enabled us to pass legislation that would provide the suicide prevention line, and then mobile crisis response teams and stabilization services that would be built underneath this system. So you'd have an easy access in, but then you'd also get more than just that person on the phone. Now, I'll say that the estimates are that the vast majority of people will actually be able to be served by these highly trained professionals who answer the phone. And that's also game changing, right? Currently, when you call 911, those are not people trained in how to handle mental health crisis, right? These people are specifically trained to handle the suffering of crisis or those supporting them. So we decided here in California that we wanted to take that on. It gave us the opportunity not only to build that structure, but also to pass a fee to fund it. One of the things we know is there aren't enough services because our counties don't have the resources. And the federal government enabled us to pass a fee that mirrored the 911 fee. So currently you pay on your phone bill a small fee that gives you access into the 911 system. I don't think there's any Californian that isn't grateful for that, the ability to call 911 and get the emergency services they need, whether it be an ambulance, a fire truck, et cetera. So this would mirror that and provide the same thing for those in mental health crisis. And so that was what our mission was to provide a real comprehensive system. And I don't need to tell you guys, because you know that this is absolutely a critical need here in California and across the nation. 1 in 6 Californians lives with mental illness right now. And we knew suicides have been climbing, increasing by 35% nationally over the last 2 decades. And obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated this problem. And then if you look at how we're serving those with mental health crisis in California, the largest mental health provider in the nation is the Los Angeles County Jails. Now, I say that with an asterisk, which is I don't consider them a mental health provider. So that in and of itself, when I learned that, it was shocking and disturbing. Our jails should not be the solution for those suffering from what is a healthcare crisis. And so, you know, we look at what our law enforcement is doing, and 20% of their staff time is spent dealing with people in mental health crisis. So law enforcement has actually been a partner in this effort because they know that they're not trained to handle those suffering from mental illness. They want, you know, my colleague who's a former CHP officer stood up on the floor when this was up for debate in the assembly, and he spoke about showing up in situations where someone was suffering from mental health crisis and knowing he wasn't trained to handle the situation and feeling just desperate for someone who could communicate with an individual that he wasn't trained to communicate with. In addition, if we take 20% of what the cops are doing, which is dealing with situations they don't want to and are not trained to handle and deserve a healthcare response, guess what? Law enforcement is available to do the things we want them to do, which is keep our community safe. So it's a win-win all around to really give this to the healthcare system, which is where it should be in the first place. Obviously, incidents like Miles and others shows us that there are tragic consequences also to those in mental health crisis being responded to by law enforcement. 25% of officer-involved shootings are people in mental health crisis. So this dynamic is really deadly and we want to change it. And if we can change 25% of officer involved shootings, that is a significant percentage. So this is just, I mean, I see this bill as criminal justice reform and healthcare reform. And I just think it really solves so many of the things that we're trying to do here in California. So what does the bill do? I think that's important to talk a little bit about. So it would be phased in. Part of what we struggle with here in California as, you know, a mini nation, if you will, right? The 5th largest economy in the world with 40 million people, is that our counties are incredibly diverse, right? So if you think about the way this would be handled in a county like Alameda County versus, you know, Shasta County, it's going to look really different depending on how rural and community is, how urban, what are the current level of services. So we know that we need to give time for this to really become successful in every single county. That being said, certain counties are ahead of others. Los Angeles is already doing this in large part, and we want to support their continued growth. So is Contra Costa and others. We know cities like Oakland are moving forward, but we don't want a patchwork approach. We want every Californian to have access into this system. So what will happen when we get this legislation passed is you will be able to call or text 988 and get 24/7 support through the suicide prevention hotlines with trained professionals. They will, one really critical piece that we actually just got into the governor's January proposal is that it will be interoperable with 911. So if you call 988 and it turns out you need an ambulance, they'll be able to transfer you over to 911 and make sure you get those emergency services. If you call 911 and what you really need is mental health care, they'll be able to transfer you to 988. And that was something we fought really hard for because we think it's critical to the safety of Californians, both those that need 988 and those that need 911. At that point, as I said, we think the vast majority of people will be served through the hotline. But for those that need someone on the ground, right, as Miles Hall did, his family needed help on the ground, they will be able to deploy mobile crisis response teams. The county will have the funding, which is actually a fun fact about the funding. You'll see how dorky I am that I think this is a fun fact. The federal government is providing an 85% match on those mobile crisis response teams. So if the state puts up 15%, the federal government is going to match it at 85%. So one of the things the governor proposed in January that we've been fighting really hard for is we got to put up that 15% so we get the 85%. And we're going to go ahead and do that. And then that mobile crisis response team will be peers, mental health professionals, those trained to respond in crisis. Obviously, where there really is a threat to public safety, we can either send out a team with law enforcement present as well. LA has a really great system where they're tiering it and deciding who to send. Do you just need mental health professionals? Do you need that and law enforcement? So they have someone to de-escalate, but law enforcement if necessary. And those decisions would be made about who would be sent out, and then the counties would do so. And then obviously that moment of crisis is just the first step. The federal legislation allowed us to also fund stabilization services so we can sort of get people into a place where they're stabilized. And we don't want people languishing in emergency rooms or in jails, right? We want people getting care. I will say, so that's sort of that is the scope of services that we are allowed to provide under the enabling legislation from the federal government. The reason they have to enable it is that it's on your phone bills and the federal government controls our phone lines. But what's important to say, and I know all of you know, is that these are short-term solutions to mental health crisis. We also have an incredible amount of work to do in addition to AB988 to make sure that we have ongoing services for people who need it. We have mental health care for people who need ongoing care. And that is not in AB988. And I confess this is not the solution to every problem. I'm often asked that, and I'm like, I'm not trying to do everything in one bill. But my colleagues and I are committed to continuing to build up the continuum of care, and we know how important those services beyond stabilization are. So the fee, which is really critical because our counties cannot do this without the funding, will function the same way our 911 fee does. And it's actually, again, as a little bit of a dork who's fairly fiscally conservative, I think the way the 911 fee functions is one of the best in government. So the way it works is that the Office of Emergency Services has to calculate the actual cost of running the system. So currently they do this with 911, and they have to come report back to the legislature. This is what it actually costs us. We need you to approve it. And that is a constant process of approval of that fee so that there's real oversight of what they're doing and are they doing it well. And a few years ago, they came back to the legislature and they said, we need to go to 911 next gen. We need to be able to locate people on cell phones, and we need to have text services, things we knew Californians wanted. And we said, okay. And they said the actual cost of it, and we upped the cost. But that continual conversation, I think, gives real oversight to that fee to make sure it's going to what we want it to go to and not being misdirected, which happens so much with the money that's supposed to go to mental health care. So we're really putting in tight guardrails to make sure this money is going to these services that we know are so critical. We've capped it, so it can't be more than 80 cents, although we imagine that the actual cost will be significantly less than that, but we wanted a can't go above number. So that is in the bill. I want to point out that two things about the fee. One is low-income Californians are exempt. That's true of the 911 fee today, and it will be true of the 988 fee. And secondly, we also wrote into the bill something really critical, which is many of these services, especially for those that are insured in California, are meant to be covered. It is the responsibility of our insurance companies to pay for that. One of the things we put in the bill is that the fee on people's phone bill cannot supplant the funding, the other sources. So you have to first go and get that money from the insurance companies, and then our backstop is that 988 fee. So we're really working to keep that fee as low as possible. As I said, we've really made incredible progress, although the bill did not pass last year, in part because of the complex nature of the counties in California and how to make this work across the state. We have made incredible progress, and the commitment we saw from the governor last week in his proposed budget just showed how far we've come in really getting momentum in California for this system. So in September, we took additional budget actions, and in those actions, we were able to get $20 million to build up the phone centers for the 988 launch in July. This is super critical because the last thing I want is for our suicide prevention hotlines to become like the EDD. Right now, when people try to call and get their unemployment, they're on hold for hours and hours and hours. The last thing I want is for people in crisis to be on hold. And we knew with an increase in the number of calls coming into that 988 that we had to build up our call centers beyond the capacity they have today. And that's what that 20 million did that we passed in September, because we had to do it by July. So we've started to do that. We've started to build up the capacity in our call centers to handle this increase. You'll see, and you've already started to get communications from your phone carriers about 988, but there will be a national rollout coming from the federal government. So that's part of why we will see an uptick in call volume. But then just last week, the governor proposed $7.5 million additional money. And the exciting part about that was that $6 million of that funding was to be ongoing, which is the hardest money to get in Sacramento. Right now we're flush. The one-time money is much easier than ongoing funding, but it really showed a commitment to this system working in the long term. It provided for 10 staff members at the Office of Emergency Services to run this system and oversee it, which is really critical to its success. And again, for the interoperability of 911 and 988. We think more is needed than $7.5 million before July to really get this going. And so the legislature will be pushing for some additional funding. But again, the governor's proposal was really, it made me ecstatic because it just showed a serious commitment to this coming from his administration. And I think that is so critical to our success. And it is an amazing starting point. And they also have charged Health and Human Services with coming up with a plan for our success, which is we really need. As I said, this is going to be complicated. So where do we go from here? As I said, this is difficult work, but it's something that I'm committed to. It is, I think the conversation itself has been so healthy for the legislature. Just today, I had a colleague of mine in the Women's Caucus. We were doing a press conference on a completely different issue, walk up to me and said, okay, I heard 988 is stalled. I want to become a champion. Put me as a joint author. Let me do this with you. And started telling me the story of someone in her community who had just suffered from mental health crisis. And it's becoming a conversation in the legislature that is elevated. And I think that in and of itself is destigmatizing, and it's important, and it's making this an issue that more and more of my colleagues are wanting to fight for. So I wish we could have, saved the lives of those that have already been lost, but I know that this is going to save lives in the future. And so we're committed to carrying it out and to getting it done. And continued advocacy from groups like NAMI is really important. We've been so blessed in all of our hearings to have incredible support getting a 2/3 vote on a fee is never easy, but this one not only do I believe it's possible, but we have incredible bipartisan support already, co-authorship on both sides of the House of people who are going to support this bill, including the fee. And we really think we can get it done. So that's what we have ahead of us in the year to come. And I am just happy to take any questions.
Am I not muted? Okay.
You are not. I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. And actually, I say this with all due apology, Julie, but I'm going to put you on the spot because I wonder if you could just inform everyone about and for Rebecca's knowledge on the mental health crisis response program that's in the planning for Pleasanton.
Actually, I would love to be able to put Chief Swing on the spot. I believe he's on with us. Chief Swing, are you able to chat with us and update us? Because I know you know more than I do of what's current. There you are. Thank you for being here, David.
Councilmember, good evening.
There you are. Okay. Fabulous. So if you're comfortable giving an update, I really would rather you give it because you're working on it, and I'm sure is a lot that you've done more recently that I'm not familiar, and I don't want to get it wrong. So
Sure. Well, it's, as you know, it's still very much in the development phase. We look forward to rolling it out by July 1st of this year. And as we talked about in the council meeting, it's a two-pronged approach with two clinicians, juvenile clinician focused on interventions in our schools and with our youth. And then secondly, an adult clinician partnered with the police officer, modeled in plain clothes, modeled after the San Diego psychiatric emergency response team model, and to respond to crisis-related incidents in our community.
okay. So great, fantastic update. Love that we're on target for that July. That's an actual start date where we should be functional, or is that where the program is funded and getting up to speed? Do we believe our team will be ready to be in the field?
Well, we can say we believe they will, yes. However, the unknown is staffing. And throughout the region and in other counties, the biggest challenge is staffing the clinician position to work the odd hours that are required out in the field, and a different environment than is a typical clinician environment. And so it's really staffing dependent. And so I really don't want to say, yes, we will on July 1st, when there are factors outside of my control that we're unable to control for, frankly. We do believe strongly that we will be operational by July 1st, and that is our goal. And we tend to achieve our goals. We're a pretty goal-oriented profession and department, and we enjoy serving our community and recognize that this model will be of great service to our community in Pleasanton.
Yes, it will be. Thank you. So, I heard something in the assembly members' discussion that I hadn't heard before. So while our program is funded through general fund dollars, the city council has allocated the necessary funds, and we're very happy to be able to do that. We feel lucky that we have the resources to do that. But what was the 85 match? Was that in for a crisis response, and would that be something that we would, with our program, have an opportunity to apply for some reimbursement of the program, or did I understand that incorrectly?
I'd have to look more specifically at the way that's written. I know it's healthcare dollars. That's how they're doing it in the federal government. But we could look into that for sure. I don't know the
It
answer
was-
off the top of my head.
I mean, that's really wonderful that there's even
It
the
is.
possibility there, because
Right?
we've, moved forward without anything like that. And that would just give us all kinds of other possibilities. And with something like that, I know that we talked originally about wanting it to be a Tri-Valley program where we would work together with Livermore and Dublin. And many of the residents or family members who are on here are in fact either Livermore or Dublin, and have asked why aren't they joining us. So David, I don't want to put, this one really is putting you on the spot, but the other, yeah, sorry. The other cities have chosen not to join us. And is that possible that once they see how terrific and our program is working out, that might change? And is it possible that when they see that there might be this fund where they might be able to tap in? Because we had actually kind of invited them without requiring a contribution in the beginning, didn't we? I'm not quite sure how we did that.
Excuse me. So I can't, I see the value in a regional program as well. Unfortunately, I can't speak for how soon Livermore and Dublin will come alongside us. I do know, in talking with their respective leadership in their police department, that they are working on other programs as well, and similar in some ways and dissimilar in others. And so I know it's a priority in each of their communities and with their leadership. And I look forward to at some point having some sort of a regional program, as I believe there's some certain economies of scale and service model that can be applied that serves the entire core Tri-Valley region of Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton. That being said, I also know that the typical times and calls for service are pretty consistent throughout the profession. And so a regional model, of course, will require staffing that allows us to serve each of our communities equally.
All right. And of course, I mean, a regional, a program like this, because our loved ones aren't limited to those boundaries of our city. And we want to know that if they're not in our city, they can expect the same quality and type service, and vice versa. We want to be able to serve the loved ones of family members from our neighboring cities when they're in our city. So really an important thing to continue to pursue. Well, thank you. It's a good opportunity. David, if you had any questions for the Assembly member on how we are going to work together with the, I'm sorry, I'm going into your territory now, Marcia, am I?
No, you're not. No, you're not. You're doing fine because I asked you that. I do have some questions so that I want to make sure get answered. So
Okay, then let me just finish this one if you don't mind, because
absolutely. Go ahead.
There was some question. Assembly member, when is 988 up and running? Because if we're running in July, we won't have the 988 yet, right?
Well, so yes and no. So 988 goes live per the federal legislation in July. So come July, anybody in America will be able to call 988 and get the suicide prevention hotlines. That was true. That's true whether the state does nothing, which is why we had to do the funding to get the call centers up and running for July. But we do not anticipate in July that it will be set up sufficient to do mobile crisis response. That will be in the works. So yes and no. But I want to say, Julie, first of all, I want to thank you for your incredible advocacy in Pleasanton as a council member on behalf of this issue. You have just been incredible in your passion, your willingness to never give up on this issue. And we've seen the results of this. And I think it's awesome. I also want to highlight, though, you talk about the one issue where you're not working, but Access Bridge, where the three cities are working together to support the mental health urgent care, which is another incredible initiative of the Tri-Valley. So kudos to you on that.
Well, thank you, because I truly know that Marcia and I played a significant role in getting the attention of the right people and getting that going. And we're very excited about it, and it absolutely is a big piece of this. And I think with all, and thank you, David. I think it's game changer for the Tri-Valley, all of these things that are coming and happening. And certainly I appreciate the acknowledgement, but my team of NAMI Tri-Valley have driven me for over a decade. And of course, Marcia being the one who has been consistent and really led us all. So I'll stop taking up so much time, Marcia.
You're doing great, and thank you. Does anyone, I mean, I just want to make sure, and does anyone have any questions to ask our assembly member? I have a question though.
Go for it.
Because I'll go for it, yeah. What can NAMI Tri-Valley do to either support, sponsor, advocate? What would you like to see us do?
So NAMI is a sponsor of the bill. And we would love to have NAMI Tri-Valley also. So we can, if you guys want to and have the capacity, we would love to have a letter of support, which we add to the system. And it just shows whenever we go to vote on a bill, we have access to all of those letters of support, and we get to read them and see why this is important to the community. So it's a really important way to show your support, and Marilyn can get you the details on how to do that. And then, we continue to push out when we have hearings or moments when we need some help. NAMI is really critical because, again, my job is to get enough votes, 2/3 votes to get this through. And NAMI has reached throughout the entire state, right, through your chapter system. And so, if I have a colleague who maybe needs a little bit of an extra push, you guys can actually be a huge part of that by reaching out to friends and colleagues in NAMI to say, your member needs a call from you, right? And you guys don't need to call me, I'm on it, but, I think that's a really important action for you guys to take. And then we always push out when we have a hearing. And if you want to call in your support, we've made it with COVID, it's actually incredibly easy now to testify and support. I think Julie's called into a few of our hearings. And, you just call in, you have to wait sometimes, so you can be doing something else while you wait. And then you get to, put your support in. And it really is powerful when the members hear person after person after person calling in and support. And sometimes people say things, you're pretty much only allowed to say, Councilmember Julie Testa from Pleasanton in support, but people will say things, a mother who's been affected by mental illness or whatever, right? Your connection to the issue. And it's really powerful. So we always put that out on social media when those hearings are coming and how to call in to testify.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll sign up and support. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So Marilyn, we can talk or at least get.
You got it. I'll make
information.
sure.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions? It's awfully quiet. So,
you want to hear about the two
okay.
other bills we're doing in the mental health space? Should I tell you? Because one of them actually touches on something that Chief Swing said. So one of the things that is obviously is top of mind for, I think, all of us is the lack of providers that exist in the space. We need more. We need more all the time. And one of the things that good things are coming out of this pandemic. Not everything, and we absolutely have lost too many lives, but we're learning a couple things. And one of the things that we saw was actually, you used to be, in order to be supervised to become a licensed mental health provider, you had to go in and do these check-ins, and it was really onerous. And all that went online with the pandemic. And all of a sudden it became a lot easier for people to get to licensure because they were able to do it virtually. So one of the bills we're carrying is to make that permanent, to hopefully get more people into licensure through this amazing new technology that we have that, as we know, is really effective. So that's one bill we're carrying that hopefully will be non-controversial, but is a bit of a boost for us to get more providers into the system.
Is there a number to that, or?
We have not introduced it yet. I don't think we've crossed it, right, Marilyn?
Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
I don't think so. Yeah, so we're still waiting. Our lawyers are writing up the language, so that'll be coming soon. And the second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I was going to say, there is a question here. Do you want to finish and then I'll ask the question?
Sure. So I'll tell you about the other bill. So the other bill was something that was brought to our attention by a constituent who during the pandemic went online to use one of these apps you hear about that provides connection to mental health providers. And it became, they learned that when they filled out this incredible survey that had incredible detail about their private life that they thought was a conversation between them and their future provider, the website was selling all that information. It was not protected at all through the terms of service. And it turns out that mental health care is a loophole in California's privacy laws, because when California wrote its privacy laws, they didn't cover healthcare because healthcare is covered by HIPAA, right? Which is actually more protective. So let's leave healthcare and HIPAA and we'll protect everything else. And mental health care was this gap in the middle that isn't covered by HIPAA and wasn't covered by CCPOA, California's privacy laws. So we are going to move legislation to ensure that when people are accessing mental health care, the private information they're giving remains private.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there any interest in legislature to do a Lanterman and Petra short level of rewrite of the mental health system in California?
Wait, can you repeat that, Marsha? I'm sorry, you read that a little fast.
Oh, let me try that again. Okay. Is there any interest in the legislature to do a Lanterman Petra short level of rewrite of the mental health system in California? So that's the
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's an interesting thought. Who asked that? Oh, maybe you don't want to speak up, but I had not heard anything of that, but it's a really interesting question. I mean, there's so much work that needs to be done in this space to really provide, like I said, a full continuum of care for people who need it. And the needs are vast and different depending on who you are and what mental illness one has. And like I said, there is a lot of work ahead of us, but I have some pretty committed colleagues and I'm making sure that everyone who plans to join me is committed too. So, you know, hopefully there'll be some good work done in how we change things. But if you want to talk more about that idea, that's interesting.
So that was
Hello,
Mark.
My
Okay,
name's
there you
Mark
go.
Rahman. I'm a retired family advocate with the Family Education and Resource Center in Alameda County. And a colleague of mine, well, not a colleague anymore, but V is here. She's also with FERC. But in my work as a family advocate and voluntary work with NAMI Tri-Valley and NAMI Alameda County, I've seen lots of discrepancies on just how difficult it is to get care for somebody, where you can go for weeks putting every little piece in place and then the whole house of cards falls apart. And that happens more often than not. So I was wondering, can we rewrite the whole system? You know, I understand why Lanterman Petra's short, and I actually have met Petra's, wrote it the way they did at that time, but it's time to do something that fits better with what we're seeing out there and the difficulties we're running into. And that will mean not piecemeal writing of this program and that program and stuff, but a system that actually works together. And I could not tell you exactly what that is. I can tell you some pieces of it, but you know, people with better minds than mine who have more experience can put it together. But we need something that doesn't leave people under overpasses.
Yep. Yeah.
Or in Twin Towers.
Yeah. That's true.
So I hate to interrupt, but I do need to get the assembly member to her next appointment. Mark and V, I believe, from FERC. If you would like to set a meeting, we can go ahead and do that. I'll put my email in the chat again, and you can just reach out to me. Let's set a meeting, and we can discuss that more fully.
We want all the ideas, you guys. And I have to say that I think, as I sort of opened with talking about how I ended up working on 988, you know, my job is to serve my community. And, you know, when a constituent comes to me and tells me a story like Town Hall had, and I hear you know, how the system is not working for families and people who live here, you know, just like Councilmember Testa, our job is to step up and do something, right? And so when you have experiences that lead you to want change, I really do invite you to reach out, because that's the work, and that's what makes me work so hard every day and makes me want to do this job and makes me want to serve, is that there are ways that we can do better, and let's figure those out. And they're often complicated. It's not often that we work on easy bills. So, you know, that's okay that it's complicated. And sometimes that's why it takes 2 years or 3 years to move a piece of legislation the magnitude of 988. And that's okay, right? It's, you know, I would have loved it in 1 year, but we'll put in the work until we get it right.
Well, very good. And I cannot thank you enough for your coming here and informing us, enlightening us. And I hope that we'll be able to, you know, invite you back. And thank you.
One
Yeah,
last
thank
question. Assembly member, how many years do you have left in term limits?
I have 9 more years. I got time.
Yeah, that's great.
That was the question.
Okay.
Thank you
All right,
so
then.
much, Assembly Member, really, for coming and talking to us, but for the work that you've been doing. We are very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm telling you, the work you do in the community is life-saving and important. And really, I get to enjoy the stories of the lives you save. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Well,
All right.
was
Thank
someone
you.
going to say something else?
Um,
Okay, then I'll
I
say.
have a question in the chat kind of directed at me, and if the Assembly member needs to go, I'll understand, but Chief Swing is still here, because the question is the Pleasanton program, the crisis response program, going to conflict or complement the county programs? And I think David Swing could probably, Chief Swing could help answer that, but Assembly member, I'm not sure that you would have an answer for that, because you're not really at this point working with the county on their crisis programs, are you? You're not really.
We're not. No, we don't have any county yet. Ooh, am I
Yeah.
open? But I will say that it sounds complimentary. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound like it would be butting up against anything. From
I
what I'm
don't think
hearing.
it'll conflict, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say complementary either. I would say independent. But Chief Swingham,
Oh,
thank
fair
you for
enough.
coming
Fair
back.
enough.
Yeah, because we kind of did feel we would have loved to have been able to be served by the programs that the county has, but they just don't. Like, I think you started off sharing, and it really wasn't practical and wasn't going to serve. And for us to wait until that was extended more to us was a risk of time that we weren't willing to wait. So Chief Swing, did you want to respond to that?
Sure, thank you. The program is designed to fill a void that we currently have in the Tri-Valley. We don't have an immediate crisis response. It's timely in the Tri-Valley area of Alameda County. And so the program is designed to fill that void. So one might call it complementary, one might call it independent. I think that's just a matter of kind of splitting hairs, but it's really filling a need that exists in our community.
And I'm very grateful for that, because yes, it was definitely an unmet need. And yeah, so to me, it feels independent. And if at some point more resources come available, then I think there might be opportunity to work together. And certainly if our neighboring cities, I think that would be more working complementary with whatever they've got going. But I'm very grateful to my city that we moved forward and going to do that. I would truly like to bring our neighboring cities along with.
And that may be something that NAMI Tri-Valley can work on. So,
Right.
possible goal. Okay, I'm going to wrap up tonight. Thank you all so much for attending tonight, and we may do another one like this in some capacity, and we'll get another announcement out when we do. In the meantime, stay well, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.